in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah wrote that God sits above the circle of the earth. And that one I looked into because that was just so totally against everything I had ever heard. I investigated to see if there was any way Isaiah could have picked that up from someone else. And the earliest reference I could find was Pythagoras, the Greek mathematician, saying it 100 years after Isaiah wrote it. So that was pretty amazing. That Psalm 19 says that the sun has its own orbit. And I believe that was proven in 1999.
Yeah.
I mean, this is incredible stuff. The Bible talks about the water cycle. Over 3,000 years ago, they wrote about the water cycle. At any rate, these revelations sent me down the path of reading the works of the creation scientists like Dr. Henry Morris, who was the founder of the Institute for Creation Research. And at the end, I learned that real science fits the book of Genesis and not Darwin.
Okay.
And that was an amazing revelation to me, and it took me 90% of the way to true faith.
Okay. Were you still hanging on to just a little bit of Betty Friedan and feminism and atheism at this point?
I don't think so much. I was convinced there had been a creator God at that point.
All right, fine. Now, I got to slip in a question here because surely, I mean, your mother had all sorts of your friends who were believers, and perhaps there were others in your life, and they knew you were searching. Did any of them just stop and witness to you?
Well, I would ask them questions, and nobody I knew had needed the kind of proof that I did. So they just didn't have the answers for me that I needed. Yeah, it's pretty sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
and
pretty sad.
I've got to say that there were some professing Christians who, when I started talking about the amazing facts I was uncovering in creation science, laughed in my face.
Really?
The theistic evolutionists who just do not believe in any of that sort of thing, and so that wasn't very helpful.
Now, there are some other things along the way that were going to really impress you as you further studied biblical Christianity, which by now, I am just assuming that by now you had set aside some of these other faiths you'd been looking into. Yeah, Buddhism, Baha'i, all these things. You set those aside. Those didn't make it to the top of your chart anymore.
Right, because when I was looking at them, the way I kind of describe it is that I had these mental buckets that I set out on my desk, and I was going to toss the proof for each of these religions in its appropriate bucket as I found the proof. But the stuff I kept coming across, it was things like because it works, or because there are so many of us, or because we have a holy book, and that just didn't add up to any proof to me at all. So my buckets were empty at the end, so I was able to just kind of set those things aside. And I probably would have revisited them if Christianity had come up with an empty bucket too, but it just didn't.
All right. You're listening to Understanding the Times, talking to Kitty Foth-Regner. You can get her book in any Christian bookstore, Heaven Without Her, Amazon.com, ChristianBook.com as well. Now, Kitty, all right, there were other things that really caught your attention, and one was the accuracy of the prophecies of Jesus' first coming.
That's right, Jan. It was biblical prophecy that took me to 100% doubt-free, absolute faith in Jesus Christ and in the Bible as the Word of God. And again, I was reading and reading, and I discovered that there were thousands of prophecies in the Bible that had been fulfilled to the tiniest detail. For instance, about the Messiah. I guess there are hundreds. I guess you can count them different ways. So some people say 300 prophecies and some say 500. But at any rate, he fulfilled every last one. And there was some mathematician who calculated the likelihood of just, do you know who that was? I can't remember.
No, but I
name.
know it's got so many zeros after it, I don't even know how many there are.
Yeah, he calculated the likelihood of one man fulfilling just 48 of those prophecies, and it came out to be 10 to the 157th power. And I guess that's 10 with 157 zeros after it, right?
Well, it practically stretches to the moon, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, unimaginable, impossible, impossible. So Jesus was the Messiah. But then the other thing was I stumbled across I don't even know where I found it. I know it was half-price books. It was The Late Great Planet Earth, a 1970 edition by Hal Lindsey. And that book just blew me away.
Why did it blow you away?
Well, for one thing, because even though my degree is in journalism, I used history for all of my electives. And especially 20th century history, and I was especially interested in German history and Russian history. And when I read The Late Great Planet Earth, I was learning all these things that my professors had never once pointed out. Mm-hmm. The Bible wasn't even a footnote in those classes, but specifically the prophecies on the scattering and restoration of Israel. Mm-hmm. Just amazing.
Pretty much of a miracle, isn't it? The rebirth of Israel fascinated you, as it should every Christian. Sadly, there are those listening right now who probably are saying, "So what?" And then along came replacement theology, and now the church is Israel. But nonetheless, let's keep this focused on you, because the Bible prophesied that they'd be scattered and then regathered, and that's exactly what happened. It said it would be reborn in a day, May 1948, and that really touched you. Not that I don't think you saw it born in 48, but the fact that it exists.
Right. And the fact that, and I had studied that history too, I mean, that it was born in a day, that Israel was born in a day, and that then the birth pangs will start, which of course is exactly what happened. The Arabs started attacking immediately. Mm-hmm. And in I think the book of Leviticus, it says God promised the children of Israel that they would have strength many times their numbers, right? Because he was protecting them because they're the apple of his eye. And even the ratios of like 20-to-1 strength are pretty much what you find when you look into the Israeli army versus all the Arab armies. It's just amazing. It's true. There is no way that that these were lucky guesses or anything like that.
Yeah, lucky guesses, right. Okay, so now, again, I go back and kind of forgive me that I keep going back and asking this and re-asking this question, but we're talking about some issues here they're pretty basic. That is the first coming of Jesus and how the Bible is so accurate, and the fact that it promised that Israel would be reborn as a nation and so forth. And did your mother ever mention any of these things to you, or were you in the turn-off process still and you just close your ears?
Yeah, I don't remember if she did. My mother was born in 1912, and she came from a generation where I think she was flabbergasted to have a daughter who didn't believe in God, mm-hmm. let alone the God of the Bible. I don't know that they ever even looked into the proof. I honestly don't know what she thought about what happened with Israel. I do know that she had a lot of Jewish friends, and she was interested in the nation of Israel.
Well, I mean, we can go back to the science issues, too, because they're so incredible, and the accuracy of Jesus' first coming, mm-hmm. with all those zeros and all that. So mm-hmm. those things weren't talked about.
Right. So, and I just don't know. And maybe the truth was they just thought, oh, well, of course it's true because the Bible says so. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But my mother's mother kept her cookbook was handwritten in a spiral notebook, and she would intersperse her recipes with Bible verses. It was that kind of a life that my mother mm-hmm. lived in and grew up in, and it was just so accepted that this is true. I think she just was totally unprepared to deal with me.
Well, just as an aside, and I've actually brought Hal Lindsey to the Twin Cities twice, and that book, Late Great Planet Earth, has affected so many lives, my own as well, because I was somewhat of a shaky young person and Christian at the time it came out, and that book, Late Great Planet, really put me back on solid ground and got me totally interested in the Bible again. So it's amazing how that book has been used by God.
Yeah.
And okay, so you became convinced that the Bible was the God-inspired truth, and you could trust it as God's mm-hmm. revealed truth.
Including everything that he said about heaven and eternity.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But all right, so when you figured this out, that this was God's revealed truth, what did you do then?
I repented and received the free gift of salvation. I guess my life had already been changing. I don't know if it was just-in-case type stuff I was doing or if I was really changing. But as I mentioned, I started hanging out at the nursing home where my mother lived almost immediately after she died. And all my priorities in life kind of changed. I no longer cared about making tons of money, which previously had been very high on my list of priorities. And serving God became the most important thing to me.
Did you ever think it would end up in a book form?
Well, no. Actually, I started writing it actually as notes for having dinner with my atheist girlfriends because I was kind of trying to explain to them what I was discovering because I thought they would, of course, be as excited as I was about it, but they weren't. And then I decided, okay, well, they won't listen to me now. I'll write it up as my eulogy, and then someday when I die and I'm a little older, I'll probably die first, they'll have to listen. And I started writing that, and it got really long, so I thought, well, this could be a book.
Yes, it is, and it's outstanding. Again, it's Heaven Without Her, a desperate daughter's search for the heart of her mother's faith. And yeah, you mentioned something interesting there because I'm curious to know, and we're going to have to take a break here in a minute, Kitty, but you mentioned your atheist friends. What did they think? You just stepped off a flying saucer here or what?
Pretty much, yeah. I'd say the really hardcore ones just would rather cut their toenails than be with me.
All right.
Anymore.
Did they make fun of you or did they listen?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I do is I do the Christian music hour at a couple nursing homes, and I bring my little boombox and CDs and verses typed up, and we sing. And, oh, my atheist friends laughed at that. They howled. It's a picture of me trotting in, with my little boombox. And yeah, they think it's pretty funny. But some of them are reading the book now.
Are they reading the book?
Some of them are.
Okay.
Not all of them.
Have you had any feedback from them?
Yeah, a couple of them said that it really has kind of opened their eyes to some things. And, of course, salvation is of the Lord. But I figure that all of the things that I learned just tore down my obstacles to belief. And I'm praying that it will do the same, that this information will do the same for some of these women. Okay.
Well, I want to get a little bit, I also want to talk to you about, some other things, because for one thing, I mean, having a perspective, particularly in these very troubled times, and you and I talked about it, the birth pangs are going off like crazy even as we speak. And to have the perspective of heaven is about the only comfort that we have today, those of us who are believers. And that's why I feel so for your atheist friends or for any unbelievers, because they don't have the blessed hope that you and I have, and you went through quite a process to even get there. But now we can indeed say, "O death is swallowed up in victory. Death, where is your sting?" And you and I can both say that we're going to see our mothers again someday, and I believe very soon. But I don't know when, but I believe very soon. But so I want to go into just a couple more issues here on the other side of the break. I remind you folks, please, if you would be interested in my free 6 times a year print journal, Understanding the Times, if you would just call 763-493-3010. And again, that's free. You can also access it on the website olivetreeviews.org, and you'll also find over, about almost 4 years of radio programming is now archived at olivetreeviews.org, and go to Radio Archives, and all programming from the weekend goes up on archives late Sunday, including the 2 hours from today. Okay, we're going to continue our discussion with Kitty. Her book, Heaven Without Her, A Desperate Daughter's Search for the Heart of Her Mother's Faith. We'll be back in exactly 3 minutes. Please don't even think about touching that dial.